What is up, and welcome into JR Weekly. I am JR Jeff Ratcliffe, and we're here for another one. Week 7 fantasy football betting preview show that we have here every Friday from 2 to 2:30-ish Eastern. We don't have a hard time here. We have an easy time. It's what we have. And I'm going to break down all the games for over the weekend, not Monday Night Football, because we'll be back at 2 Eastern on Monday to give you 5 bets that I like. Hopefully you got in on that under last night, by the way, in that fun game between Denver and Cleveland. Of course, you can get in on all of this information and more that I'm providing for you during the course of this show over at FTNFantasy.com for all your fantasy football needs, rankings, projections, tools, articles galore. More information than you can really probably use in a given week. It's great. It's amazing. You can choose your own fantasy adventure, do your own research at FTNFantasy.com. Get a discount with promo code RATPACK. And, of course, over at FTNBets.com, if you want to follow along with picks. Hey, I had that under in over there in the bet tracker. Also, I have no over last night that I hit on Teddy Bridgewater's completions, too. But you can get that at FTNBets.com along with my player prop tool, along with all of the bets from other folks out there. And, hey, it's NBA season as well. I'm fired up. The NBA is back. I'm not fired up at going 1-2 last night, but I went 6-1 the night before player props, so you get those. Plus, hey, our whole team, we got some great minds over there, and we are not just saying, hey, we hit every single bet, stone cold lock. You can actually see how we perform, both good and bad, just like me last night, 1-2. Hey, you can see it, though. We own up. Not everybody's going to win every night, but we are going to win more than we lose, for sure, and you can get in over there with the same promo code. That is, of course, RatPack over at FTNBets.com. You can use that at FTNDaily.com, too, if you like to dabble in the realm of DFS. But let's dive into the games this week. Well, we have 6 teams on bye. Chances are in fantasy football, you are impacted by that. You're not alone. A lot of us are. And it's going to cause, well, some very challenging start-sit decisions. It's going to cause what I think is likely to be a lot of low-scoring games for fantasy purposes. And when you go to make your start-sit decisions, remember one thing. In fantasy football, when you're making start-sit decisions each week, you don't need upside. What? I don't need upside? Everybody talks about upside all the time. Well, yes, you need upside when you're drafting teams. I don't want to draft low-ceiling guys in August. I want to draft high-ceiling guys who I can grip it and rip it with, guys who I can hit home runs with, take down the league, and call it a day. But in the season, when we're making our start-sit decisions, gripping it and ripping it, swinging for the fences, well, hey, you're going to swing for the fences. You're going to strike out a lot. You don't need upside. What you need is to score the most possible points you can with your team. That puts you in a position where you could beat your opponent. Now, you're never going to get it 100% perfect 100% of the time, but you can play the percentages just like we do in sports betting. I don't bet based on what I think, feel, or believe. I bet on what I think is most likely to occur given the percentages. So start the guys who are going to score the most fantasy points most frequently. I know it's hard to do. I know you think you figured out the secret to everything. You can see through the matrix and you know exactly who to start. But ask yourself, anytime you've gotten cute with your lineups, how often are you right? Are you wrong more often than you're right? Because I think the answer to that is almost certainly yes. If it isn't, well, just keep doing you. I mean, I got nothing for you. But most of us mere mortals can't do that. So make the start-sit decisions based on who's most likely to score the most points most frequently. And that's what underpins my rankings over at FTNFantasy.com. Remember, even if you think you're an underdog, you could still beat your opponent. If their team craps the bed and you go out and you score as many points as you can still beat them. So keep that in mind as you're making these decisions this week. Washington and Green Bay first on my list. A lot of intrigue surrounding this game. A lot of intrigue surrounding Antonio Gibson. Does sound like he is going to play in this one. And he's going to play through the injury. Now, that injury is going to hamper him. That injury is, we're not going to see a 90% snap share out of Antonio Gibson. So where we once viewed him as an RB1, I think we do have to view him more as an RB2 for fantasy purposes right now. And J.D. McKissick in a game where they're probably going to play from behind. They're dogs in this game. He's going to be viable. He's going to be an RB2 option. In games where they play from the lead, He's not going to get that passing down work as much. He has the volatility of a passing down back. So keep that in mind with J.D. McKissic, but this week, just fine. The other question is about A.J. Dillon, and in fact, that's where I want to go over to with player props in this one. So A.J. Dillon, the workload has increased a little bit. We're seeing the team had said that they want to use him a little bit more. Now they're not going to use him 20 touches per game, but 11, 12, 13 touches, that puts him into flex conversation, certainly for this week. And I do think that the rushing yards line out there offers us a good opportunity. Right now, over at FanDuel, seeing 39.5. I'm seeing this at 40.5 on other books. So that's always a good indicator. You have one book a little bit lower and you think the rushing yards are going to be a tad higher. You hammer that book who's lower. By the way, if you wanted to do that and you wanted to see exactly what I'm seeing, right now, all you have to do, go to ftnbets.com, find the prop shop. It's a free tool. You don't have to be a subscriber to use it. And it's the Google of sports betting. So you can search out A.J. Dillon. You can find A.J. Dillon, and there you go. You see all the odds. It's nice and easy. And you'll see that he's 39.5 on FanDuel at -114. Give me the over on that one. I don't think this is a 80-yard performance out of A.J. Dillon, but I think there's going to be enough meat on the bone where he sees 10, 11, 12 carries, and he is over 4 yards per carry on that workload. He's going to get up over this and give us the over on that one. So far this season, too, by the way, Washington, the 10th best matchup for running backs. So we could see both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I'm not worried at all about Aaron Jones. Going over to a very interesting litmus test type game here. How good is Tennessee? I mean, we saw them with a key win against Buffalo, but obviously now facing Kansas City. They get to face them at home, but how good are they? We know they're pretty good. We know Derrick Henry's pretty good. Little bit. Historically good, in fact. Could potentially shatter the single season rushing attempts mark. Henry has been good in basically every phase since that slow start in week 1, but otherwise he's just been so much fun to watch. I mean, we're witnessing greatness on a week-to-week basis here. 9 carries of 15-plus yards. That is tops in the league. 8 goal line carries. That's not tops in the league, but it's right up there. And he scored on 4 of those 8 goal line carries. He is well on pace to just absolutely destroy his single season career high for receptions. 19 is that number. He has 16 already. And I don't think we're going to see much more than 2 catches per game for Henry going forward. But 2 catches per game is better than 1 catch per game, which is what he typically averages. On the other side, Daryl Williams locked in, man. We got that clarity in that backfield that we were looking for with Daryl Williams. Essentially, with him and Clyde Edwards-Helaire healthy, Andy Reid used both of them. I can't really blame Andy Reid for using both of them. He used both of them. Now, with one of them not healthy, he's only going to use one. That's what he did last week. So I'm bullish on Williams yet again this week. Tannehill, by the way, if you are looking, it's a phenomenal matchup. And I do think, obviously, with what the over-under is telling me at 57.5, it's going to be a bit of a shootout. So I do think you can get away with using Tannehill in 1 quarterback leagues this week. But let's go back to Derrick Henry. And I mentioned the receptions. Now, he does have 16, but he hasn't had more than 2 since week 3. His line right now, I'm seeing 2.5 on BetMGM at +125 on the under. Give me +125. I'll take that. He has 4 receptions over the last 3 games. Now, again, I do think 2 is an appropriate number. 2.5, give me that half reception there, and I'm going to take the under on that one. Henry's going to be productive. By the way, his rushing yards line, not worth touching. It's a little high. Remember, what was that in week 2 when it was like 87 yards or something to that effect? Yeah, he's way up over 100 this week. 124.5, 125.5. Some books even at 126.5 right now. So not going to play that one right there. So let's move on to our next contest, Atlanta and Miami. My question for Atlanta, well, can you open up this passing game? And I know before the bye, Matt Ryan did look a little bit better, tossing 4 passing scores. Of course, you had Kyle Pitts getting involved. No Calvin Ridley in that contest, but really opening things up. Yet at the same time, he's still dink and dunk central. 6.2 ADOT right now for Matt Ryan. That's low. Average depth of target, just 6.2 yards, really low. Can they open that up? Cordero Patterson is going to continue to be a thing. I am fully convinced, and this is proof that we are existing in a simulation right now. He's an RB1 this week. He's an RB1. I don't know how this happened, but it did happen, and we're going to embrace it. On the other side, I know people are looking to Tua Tagovailoa. I think you could use him as a streamer, but I'd be much more inclined to use Matt Ryan. I'd be much more inclined to use Derek Carr or Ryan Tannehill, or if Joe Burrow is out there, somebody like that. But you could get away with Tua if your waiver wire is somewhat picked clean. Looks like he will get Devontae Parker back, Preston Williams back as well, some more receiving options in the fold there. Obviously, Jalen Waddle after last week is very appealing. Obviously, Mike Gaseki now is a top 10 fantasy tight end that we can kind of set and forget. The early season blues that we had with Gaseki are in the rearview mirror. So that is very encouraging right there. But I mentioned Cordero Patterson, and I do think we have an opportunity with his receiving yards. The line right now, I am seeing 38.5 on FanDuel, minus 114, certainly on the over. And really this comes down to the fact that, yes, I'm not going to gauge based on their last performance because Calvin Ridley wasn't in the mix. But even with Calvin Ridley in the mix, the team does not have a fleet of receiving options. Even if Russell Gage was healthy, they do not have a fleet of receiving options. They have Calvin Ridley and they have Kyle Pitts. Cordero Patterson has emerged as really that next man up in terms of target share in the pecking order, and he is going to get the carries out of the backfield. But for this, 38.5 feels way too low. If this was something more like 46.5, I'd feel, very reluctant to play an over on it. But I like the over. I like the usage. Hey, somebody finally figured out how to use this guy. We've known he's been an athletic freak. He's one of the best kick returners that we may have ever seen in the NFL. And I don't think that's hyperbolic whatsoever. But nobody really cracked the code until now. And now we're seeing him. And I love how they're using him. I really do. He's not going to play 90% of the snaps. And he doesn't have to be effective for fantasy. And he certainly doesn't have to get the over on that line right there. The Jets and the Patriots. Well, we're getting both of these games out of the way early. We already saw them play back in week 2. And what we have seen so far this season actually really isn't Belichickery in the backfield. Damian Harris is the clear feature back in games they're going to win. In games they play from the lead, he's the guy. And it's not close like last week, going up over 100 yards. Well, hey, this is a game where they're 7-point favorites. I do think they're going to play from the lead. Harris is going to see his workload. And, oh, by the way, the New York Jets are the number 1 fantasy matchup for opposing running backs. So this sets up well for Harris in this one. There's not a ton that you want to use with confidence. Obviously, Hunter Henry on this little touchdown streak that he's on continues to be a top 12 guy. Jacoby Myers, because there are so many players on bye this week, might even be a wide receiver too with his volume. On the other side, I don't think you can get away from Corey Davis. Of course, in my wide receiver cornerback matchups article, you can get that at ftnfantasy.com. I pointed out that they did not shadow Davis in week 2, the first matchup this season. But there is a strong chance that we see J.C. Jackson, at least partially for some of the game, travel with Corey Davis here. That puts a damper on Davis, but still I'm going to use him as a wide receiver 3 this week. Michael Carter continues to trend up. Could be a fringe RB2. He's so talented. The offense is obviously putting a cap on what he can do, but he's so talented. Reminds me a lot of Austin Eckler in a lot of ways. Let's go back to the other side. Well, actually, you know what? I could do a couple for this one. I'm going to pick on Zach Wilson. Let's stay on the Jets side. I'm going to pick on Zach Wilson because that's what Bill Belichick is going to do. Zach Wilson, in that first meeting, was certainly lost in that contest. He was lost. And I think that's going to continue here. Another look, and I don't think he's going to get the same look from the Patriots that he got in the first matchup because that's what Belichick does. And the passing yards, it's 226.5 at minus 114 on the under right now at FanDuel. I'm going to take that under. I don't think we see much more than what he threw last time, which was 210 yards. I don't see much more than that. So we'll take the under there on Zach Wilson passing yards. I don't play a lot of passing yardage numbers, but I will play this one for sure. Carolina and the New York Giants. This is a Dave Gettleman revenge game. I don't know. Every game's a revenge game. This was the matchup, though, right? We were supposed to see Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey, two of the league's brightest stars who are both hurt and not playing. McCaffrey officially will not be playing in this one. So instead, we get Chuba Hubbard and Devontae Booker. But you know what? In injury, there's opportunity. And there's been lots of opportunity for Chuba Hubbard so far this season. Hey, I didn't think we were going to see this kind of workload. I really thought he was a change of pace back, but they don't really have another option at this point, and they're using him. We saw 2 weeks ago, massive workload for him, 29 touches, still a solid workload for him last week, and the game script should set up favorably with Carolina as favorites in this one. The Giants are very friendly to opposing running backs so far this season. 4.68 yards per carry is what opposing running backs are averaging against the G-men. Only 5 teams allowing more fantasy points per game to the position. And I think Sammy Darnold's in play. You know, it's a good matchup. And obviously he does have the ability to potentially score a touchdown or two with his legs. I'm not going to bank on that. But it is a good matchup for him. So he's in play this week as a streamer. On the other side, Devontae Booker is not in a good matchup. Carolina is the worst fantasy matchup for running backs right now. So it's a tough spot for Booker, but volume-wise, as long as Elijah Penny doesn't take any more vulture carries from us here, Booker's going to see enough volume to be an RB2 here. The wide receiver situation is an absolute mess. Kadarius Toney banged up, looks unlikely. Kenny Golladay is not playing. I saw that news before I went live here. You have Sterling Shepard, who allegedly suffered a setback in his injury, his hamstring injury. So you have that. You have Darius Slayton, who's still dinged up. Evan Ingram getting dinged up. It's a mess. It really makes me reluctant to use Daniel Jones in this spot. We'll have to see exactly who is going to be starting here for this team at wide receiver. But if we're talking, we're going to see heavy reps out of Dante Pettis, out of Colin Johnson yet again, then that's just a bad spot, especially against a reasonably good Carolina defense. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. But in terms of this game for fantasy purposes, or for betting purposes, that is, we have a couple opportunities here, but I do want to go back over to Sam Darnold. Now, I just said I don't play a lot of passing yards props. I'm going to give you back-to-back passing yards props. But this is too good of a matchup for Sam Darnold to not go over 234.5. Right now on BetMGM, 234.5 minus 115 on the over. I think, this line, if it was about 10 yards higher, it would be a no play for me. If it was 20 yards higher, it'd probably be an under. But right now, with that cushion, I do like the over for Darnold here. The Giants, the secondary in theory should be very good. James Bradbury out there, Adoree Jackson, but you have been able to throw on them. So I'm going to take the over there on Sam Darnold. Now, like I said, I prefer him over Daniel Jones this week as a streamer option. Cincinnati, Baltimore, Joe Burrow, only 29 passing attempts per game. So from a sustainability factor, can he sustain the production? I'm not quite sure, but I love the connection he has with Jamar Chase. And I love that Joe Mixon is fully healthy and back in the mix here. They will have Samaje Perine back, so that's good. On the other side, Lamar is rolling. Mark Andrews is rolling. Marquise Brown is rolling. The beauty to the setup. Okay, well, if you're going to try and take away Marquise Brown, you have to stretch the field as a defense. If you stretch the field, you're going to leave the middle of the field open. And two things are going to happen. Lamar's going to run, and Mark Andrews is going to be wide open. So it's kind of the Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce type model. They're using it, and it's working this year. Unlike last year when it didn't really work, Marquise Brown didn't quite hit. He's hitting this year. It's sustainable. Rashad Bateman now in the mix as well. The backfield is a mess. It's a complete mess. They did sign Le'Veon Bell to the 53-man roster, so you have Freeman, Bell, and Tyson Williams this week. Latavius Murray dealing with a high ankle sprain. Complete mess. It's not a mess, like I said, with Joe Mixon, though. And that's where I want to key in on for betting purposes this week. I know that there's a widespread perception that Baltimore is this, unstoppable defensive force. They're a good defense, but I don't think it's completely unstoppable. I don't think that Joe Mixon, can't run on them. And he's going to see ample volume here. That they've made it abundantly clear. If Mixon's healthy, he's seeing almost all the workload. Right now, his rushing yards prop, actually, it varies by book. I'm seeing as low as 56.5 right now, and then 58.5. FanDuel has it at 58.5, 56.5 for DraftKings. I think that DraftKings number is going to ultimately go up. So we get it right now on the over. It's just way too low. Even 58.5, I think, is way too low. I think this probably should be something more like 63.5, which then puts you in a pretty tough spot to decide. But getting all of that cushion with Joe Mixon, and it's not juiced on either side, I'm going to take that at DraftKings, 56.5 rushing yards for Joe Mixon. Philly and Vegas. Well, Philly's not going to run the ball. They have 13 rushing attempts per game with the running backs. So Jalen Hurts not included. They're just not running the ball. They're not running the ball. And really all they're doing is getting way behind. Jalen Hurts playing poorly until the fourth quarter when he runs for 2 touchdowns and then has a good fantasy day. Not very confident there, though I will say Dallas Goedert with Zach Ertz out of the mix is now locked in every week top 10 fantasy tight end because the volume will be there. On the other side, Derek Carr taking shots downfield. It's uncharacteristic of Derek Carr, 9.44 average depth of target, but it's working. And it's working because you have Henry Ruggs. And it's working because last week you finally maybe unleashed Bryan Edwards a little bit as well. That one-handed catch down the sideline was a thing of beauty. So it's working. But Philly's secondary is pretty good. Darius Slay has been rolling over the last couple of weeks. Steven Nelson stepping in and really doing a nice job for Philadelphia. What an underrated signing that was. Pittsburgh, I don't know what happened there, but you let a good one go. Either way, I think this actually sets up better for Josh Jacobs. And by the way, Kenyon Drake played 12 snaps last week. He scored 2 touchdowns, but he played 12 snaps. We're not using Kenyon Drake anytime soon. This one is all about Jacobs. I actually have him at RB12 this week. Love me some Josh Jacobs. Now, player prop wise, I do think it's a pretty easy under on Miles Sanders rushing yards. Right now, again, I would head to DraftKings. This line's too high, unlike Joe Mixon, which was too low. 65.5 minus 115 on that one, too high. Seen it at FanDuel at 63.5 minus 114. That's still probably too high as well. I just don't think there's enough meat on the bone. I don't think this is a game where we see, even though Vegas has not been good against the run, I don't see us getting 15 carries out of Miles Sanders. I think it's probably still more like 8, 9, 10. And if he's averaging 4-ish a carry, he's just not going to have enough work to get the over here. Over's too high. Hammering the under on that bad boy right there. Moving on to the revenge game to end all revenge games. Jared Goff squaring off against his former team, the Rams. Matthew Stafford is running that offense the way that Sean McVay wants it to be run, and it looks so much better with him under center than with Goff under center. Cooper Kupp has been incredible. Robert Woods is surging, and Darrell Henderson is seeing heavy volume in that offense as well. On the other side, outside of TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift, there's not much to be very optimistic about right now. But Hawkinson is going to get the work, and the game script should set up very well for Swift in this one. So there is that. He is going to be involved in the passing game. 7 targets per game so far this season, and that's going to continue. Now, is there opportunity with Swift in terms of player props? I don't love his lines right now, to be honest with you. I think I'm probably going to be looking on the other side of things here, ultimately. And there's a lot of potential avenues we go in, but I'm going to go back to Darrell Henderson. I love rushing attempts props because with rushing attempts props, I don't have to predict efficiency. I just have to predict volume. So it takes one of the elements out of the equation. Fewer variables is better. 16.5 rushing attempts for Darrell Henderson at minus 120. So it is juiced to the over right now at DraftKings. But again, another easy over for me in this instance here. I think they play from the lead early. He doesn't leave the field for the most part. I mean, yeah, we saw a little bit of Sony Michel last week, but last week also over 20 carries for Henderson. I think he blows by this one. It's not going to be a first half over, but he'll blow right by this one. I think this line, if it was 18.5, then it would be a no play. Even 17.5 makes it a little tricky, but I love having it at 16.5. And we might even see it go up if that does get hammered in the next, day and a half or so. Houston, Arizona, another revenge game here. DeAndre Hopkins getting that sweet taste of revenge. Every game's a revenge game. Anyway, on the Houston side, we know one thing and one thing only. Brandon Cooks is basically the only viable option, except there are 6 teams on bye, so you could possibly use Mark Ingram this week. But it really comes down to the other side of the football. Kyler is rolling. He has all of these offensive weapons to throw to. DeAndre Hopkins, who I love in this game. Christian Kirk, I actually dig him in this game. AJ Green, we have Rondale Moore. You have all that upside, and you add Zach Ertz to the mix. But what about the run game? We know you can run on Houston. We know that Arizona's, and there's some big spreads this week. Arizona's heavily favored in this one. So what about that run game? And here's what I can say. In games where they have been blowouts, James Conner has been heavily used. In games where they're closer, they're not going to use as much James Conner. We're going to see plenty of Chase Edmonds, who's a little dinged up but should play in this one. They're going to use both here. They're both in play. I mean, James Conner has 4 runs of 15-plus this year, but then he's not getting the goal line work. 7 goal line carries for James Conner, only 1 for Chase Edmonds. So Chase Edmonds has that upside. Conner has the red zone appeal. Conner also has the volume appeal. And so we'll go back to rushing attempts. Right now, James Conner, and actually pretty interesting here, juiced to the under on DraftKings, but I'm not going to play the under. I'm going to play the over. 13.5 rushing attempts, over -105. Give me that. Give me a little -105 action. I need that in my life right now. If this was 15.5, I don't think I would play it. But 13.5, give it to me all day long. Love the over there. I think we see probably, about 15 or 16 carries for Conner. So that's an easy over for me right there. Chicago, Tampa Bay. Well, Tampa Bay is rolling. Leonard Fournette is rolling. Tom Brady is rolling. Mike Evans is still inconsistent. But, hey, that's Mike Evans. We know Mike Evans at this point. But I think on the other side is pretty interesting. A couple conversations. First and foremost, Justin Fields has been starting, and he's in a matchup that is a pass funnel matchup. You have a great run defense in Tampa. You have a secondary that is completely banged up and scraping the bottom of the barrel quite literally at this point. So opposing offenses can throw on this defense. Justin Fields has been pushing the ball vertically, though he is not throwing a lot. He is pushing the ball vertically. He has Allen Robinson who can get downfield, and certainly Darnell Mooney who can get downfield and make those plays. I think it's interesting for Justin Fields in this one to open the passing game up, because I don't think we're going to see a lot of efficiency out of Khalil Herbert. We may see some decent enough volume to use him as a fringe RB2 in fantasy, but the efficiency against that defense is tricky. Justin Fields last week goes up over 40 rushing yards, and we finally kind of saw that element to his game, that element that we know was there at Ohio State. We saw it last week. Well, in a game where maybe he is going to throw just a tick more, that does open up the potential to scramble just a tick more. And right now I am seeing the line, rushing yards line at 18.5. So it's not a small line for quarterback rushing yards. Once you get up into that range, it's getting up there. But I still think he goes way over this line. -114 on that on FanDuel. It's -115, same line on DraftKings, so really no difference there. I love the over here. I think, again, the more opportunities to pass opens up more opportunities to scramble, and he's going to scramble because he's a young quarterback. And that's what young quarterbacks do. They lean on their athleticism. So we see that here with Justin Fields in this contest. All right, rounding it out. I'm not going to do Monday, remember. Monday we'll be back at 2 p.m. Eastern, so let's round it out with Sunday Night Football. Indianapolis, San Francisco could be impacted by some weather. This is the time of year where weather starts to creep in, so just a reminder there. Could see some wind, could be a little wet in that contest, which does tend to favor the run game. And, man, the run game is working for Indy right now. Jonathan Taylor's on fire over the last 3 weeks. Now, San Francisco is pretty good against the run, but it doesn't matter for Jonathan Taylor. They're going to feed him the rock. He's going to make plays like he does. He's going to rip off runs like he does, and he's going to have a big game. RB5 for the week. It's tough to use the passing game. You may have to use Michael Pittman as a wide receiver 3, even with the weather. You may have to. I don't love it, but there are 6 teams on bye this week. On the other side, Jimmy G will – I don't know if he's officially been named the star, but he's going to play this game, and Trey Lance is not. Dink and dunk actually doesn't hurt Deebo Samuel, though. You know, you'll have dink and dunk, you'll have weather. I don't care. Deebo Samuel is still an elite play this week. But let's talk about the backfield. people have acted widely like Kyle Shanahan's been pulling the wool over our eyes the whole season, but not in that backfield. He has not. He's actually been very transparent if we're paying attention. Every time Elijah Mitchell has been healthy, Elijah Mitchell has been clearly the top back in that backfield. Elijah Mitchell's healthy. He's going to be clearly the top back in this backfield. Now, Indy is a tough run defense, don't get me wrong, but I still love Elijah Mitchell, the outlook for him going forward. And I have him at RB14 this week, so he is a very strong play this week for fantasy purposes. Let's take a look at Jonathan Taylor, though, which is often fun to do. Jonathan Taylor, right now, the rushing yards line is too low. It's too low on a couple books. DraftKings and BetMGM have him at 62.5. The line is 64.5 on FanDuel right now. I'm going to play the over on that 62.5. And in fact, right now I'm still showing minus 115 on BetMGM. So play that over. This is probably 10 yards too low in my book. Based on what we've seen, I know that you might look and you say, okay, well, he's been over 100 yards in 2 of the last 3, but what about in week 5? Okay, yes, he had over 100 receiving yards in that game. He's still been fantastic, and they're going to feed him in the rock in this one. They're going to feed him the rock. I don't care about the matchup. I don't care if San Francisco is relatively good against the run. It's Jonathan Taylor. The line is too low, and the volume is going to be there as well. So I'm playing the over there. If you want all that information, like I said, hey, I'm using the prop shop here live on this show. You can do it too. Pretty simple. FTNbets.com, prop shop. Search out Jonathan Taylor or whoever the heck you want. You search out NBA guys, search out NHL, whatever's going on that particular night. You can find all the odds in your particular state as well. And then click on through, go to the sports book, sign up, boom, you play. It's nice and easy, just like that. FTNbets.com. If you want to get behind a paywall, promo code RATPACK. FTNfantasy.com, same thing, promo code RATPACK. FTNdaily.com, same thing, promo code RATPACK. Follow all those handles on Twitter as well. Just put an @ in front of those bad boys. And I'm at Jeff Ratcliffe on Twitter. Shout out Rat Pack for everybody who's been watching this thing. Appreciate you guys. And remember, Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, I'll be back. Talk some Monday Night Football betting and try and crush this weekend. Enjoy the football. Enjoy the Friday night. Enjoy whatever you got going on this weekend. I'll catch you Monday at 2. I'm Jeff Ratcliffe, and I'm out.